Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Red Jackson, and today I have the pleasure of being here live on YouTube, and I'm going to be speaking with the wonderful Tom Bähler. And so, please comment below if you have any questions you'd like me to ask Tom. We have about an hour of interview here today, and we're going to be talking all about his musical career, working with the likes of Quincy Jones, Elvis Presley, and most of all, Michael Jackson. So, Tom, if you're ready, let's bring you on in. Here we go. Hello.
Hey, Red.
How are you?
I'm great, man. I have a question for you. Excuse
okay.
me.
The tables have turned here.
How'd you get the name Red?
Well, my initials, R-E-D, I just kind of put them together and voila, and it happened to match this background behind me, and so everything came together perfectly.
Very good. Thank you for explaining that, because I had a feeling maybe you were a redhead.
No, I've had few people think that before, but
Yeah.
No, it's just like a sort of pseudonym online. That's what I go by now. But it's strange
Cool.
because sometimes I hear people sing the color red, just like day-to-day life, and I think, oh, me? But no, you know. But how are you? How's things with you?
I'm great. Are you in England?
I am. I'm in Wales, so right next to England in the UK.
Yes.
You're calling in from LA, right?
I'm in Santa Ynez, actually, on a ranch.
Okay. What's things like there nowadays?
Well, it's wonderful. It was a good place for me to come at this time in my life. I lived in LA and New York most of my career.
Yeah.
And loved both cities very much. But
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, it's okay.
How did, like, New York and LA sort of compare then? Because, I mean, they both must have been hotspots for the music industry.
Well, they are, but I'm not a comparison boy.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? I take things for what they are. Every human being I meet is an individual. You know, I can tell you this, that New York, I was brought in to be the creative director at Radio City Music Hall.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I've had some wonderful jobs. And the thing is that when I started my career, I didn't have music was important to me. And being second generation, my dad was a great trumpet player. He was self-taught, lived in a little town in Missouri, but learned how to play trumpet. And then later on in his 20s went to Juilliard. So he was both street savvy and excuse me, and properly educated.
Trained. Yeah.
And I love that because he waved it. I mean, he that measure became very important to my brother and me because Dad felt, for instance, my mom is from the Hollers of West Virginia. Hollers are like these little, I don't know, they're just kind of off the beaten path. And parents would come out and go, Marcy, you know, that kind of thing. And Logan was a coal mining town.
Okay.
But anyway, my dad always said about my mom, she had no musical education, no anything like that. But he said, your mom is the best musician in this family. She had a great voice. My dad had a great voice. I didn't know I was learning vocal arranging, but my dad, we also owned a record store. We had a lot of things that were about music, you know, and Dad wouldn't put a radio in the car because we'd get in the car, and if we were going to be in there more than 10 minutes, my dad would say, name a tune. And whatever Back then, there was a show on Sunday night called Your Hit Parade. It was wonderful, and they'd do the top 10, and we'd usually want to pick one of those, and my mom would sing lead. I was a little boy. I sang alto. My brother was a few years older than me, and he sang tenor, and my dad sang the bass part. Well, he would sing us all our parts. And I didn't realize, but I was 3 years old and I was learning vocal arranging. Yet nobody do lose it. But I feel so, I love my life and I'm grateful for it.
Wow. So that was like instilled in you from like the youngest age possible, really.
Absolutely. That and storytelling.
Yeah.
I love to write as well. And we had this record store, as I said, and Warner Brothers had come out with this product after the war called a reader record. And there were 78s, you get 4 records in both sides. And they would tell a classic story like, for instance, The Hare and the Tortoise. Okay. Yeah. And they would tell it with the Looney Tunes characters, and Bugs Bunny was the biggest of the Looney Tune characters. Yeah. So him being the the hero, so to speak, in the original story of The Hare and the Tortoise, of course the tortoise wins, but in their story, yes, Bugs went to sleep, but they painted the tortoise kind of with a different brush, so he was kind of a cheater. And so anyway, I'm 3 years old, and Dad would send these when they would come into the record store. He'd say, "Send those to my boys," So this guy knocks on the door. I knew him well, and he gave me this thing, and it was Bugs Bunny and the Tortoise, and I put it on right away and listened to it, and it just blew me away. And when my dad came home, I was always glad to see him, but this time I threw my arms around his leg and I said, "Oh, Dad, I love this record and the story." He said, "What story is that?" I said, "Well, it's the hare and it's Bugs Bunny and the tortoise." He goes, "Oh, that's a great story." He says, "That's not a new story." And I said, "It's not?" He said, "No, that story is 2,500 years old." And I was like, "Bugs Bunny isn't 2,500 years old." And Dad says, "You're right. He's not, but the story is." So he kind of had me interested. And he said that was written by a man named Aesop, who was a slave in Greece, and yada, yada, yada. So then he said, "You know what? I'm going to go buy a book." So he bought the book of Aesop. So I was raised not only in music like that, but I was also raised with these classic stories that were actually, once I studied later, I studied as much as I could about him, but riddles, basically, that's what they were based upon. Riddles were the primers of nations. They used to use them instead of going to war. They would send their chamberlain to your chamberlain, and whoever won, that's where the cash changed. So, but it was better than killing each other.
Yeah.
So I got very, very interested in that. So, so I love the whole creative world. Yeah. And I think that's why Michael and I and my brother, we were sort of his preferred vocal arrangers for pretty much his whole. I worked with him first time I was 13, and it was on his first. I guess you want me to talk about these stories, right?
100%, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll tell you how I met Michael, because there was a wonderful arranger. Gene Page was his name, and he was a great orchestral arranger, and he worked at Motown a lot. And one thing is that he was so wonderful with the orchestras, and we found out as studio singers that not all, every arranger is different, but there were quite a few arrangers who just kind of sloughed off the vocal thing because it wasn't their thing. They were into instrumentalists, you know, and we would be careful when we were on the date and look at these parts and say, you know, they could use some little bit of love, you know. So I would pull Gene to the side, you know. I didn't want to embarrass him or anything, but I say, hey, Gene, I got some ideas for. He says, please, anything you think of, just you don't have to ask me, just do it. And so that's the way. So then finally he said, you know what? I'm not going to do any vocal arrangements anymore. I'm just going to take the orchestra. I'm going to tell them to hire you to do the vocals. So that's how I got called in to do Michael's first solo album, which was called Music and Me.
Yeah. And
the song that he was singing, I happened to be a song that I loved and was a huge hit in the 50s. Oh, shoot, I'll think of his name in a minute. Sometimes I get the end of these stories. But anyway, the song, you may know it. But anyway, the song is Too Young. They tried to tell us we're too young to really be in love. You know, and
I know the one. Yeah.
And of course, marketing-wise, they said he was 11, but he was really 13. And those things don't matter. It's just part of the biz. You know, everybody does that.
Yeah.
And so Gene called me. He says, hey, man, I want you to do the thing on this. And Michael's going to sing this song. And I thought, holy moly, how can a 13-year-old have a grasp of this? And so they sent me a rough vocal of his, and I put it on my cassette. It blew me away. When he sings, he's 1,000 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's such depth in his heart and his humanity. So when I do a date, well, I mean, if I'm hired as a singer, I always get there about 20 minutes early. But if I'm arranging, I get there an hour and a half early, so make sure everything is in order. So when the artist comes in, you know, you're ready to go. Yeah. And most of my artists who do have brothers who sing and stuff like that, you sing them their parts because they're not in the business to learn how to read music, and it means nothing really, you know. And so I got there early, and I was in the main studio, which was dark, but there was light coming in from the booth because they were setting up the tapes. So there's a little glow, and I'm in a corner, and all of a sudden the big door opens, and in lumbers this teenager who's tall and skinny. And I had already seen the brothers downstairs or in the lounge, and Michael wasn't there. But anyway, I could tell it was Michael, and I kept my eye on him because the way that I worked, I would never introduce myself to the artist. The producer would introduce me to the artist.
Got it. Okay.
So, you know, I mean, it was just a protocol that we did.
Yeah.
And but I was keeping my eye on him because he was actually to my side. As he walked in, I'm looking at the right side of him. And I'm keeping my eye on him because if he looks over and sees me, then I will need to introduce myself. So that was my thought. But the interesting thing is this teenager lumbers in like every other teenager, you know. But as he took steps into the studio, there was a transformation, and it blew me away. Every step he took became lighter and lighter. He was almost floating by the time. I'm just talking about the essence of his being. And when he walks over and he's 13 years old, you know, he walks over to the piano, and the piano's got one of those soft covers on it. And he just stands and leans on the piano, and he's in the waist of the piano, and I see him looking off into space. And again, I'm looking at the side, but I can still see that he's like somewhere else. And he's no longer a lumbering, but he's kind of he's a blessed being. That's all I can say. And all of a sudden he starts singing Climb Every Mountain. And the voice I heard was like 1,000-year-old person. I mean, I'm talking about not the sound of 1,000-year-old person, but that had lived that much. There was such depth in it. And he only sang it for about 20 seconds. But and then the doors and the lights went on, and the brothers came in, and we were at work, and the producer comes in and introduces me, and we're off to work. But that was a moment that I will never forget as long as it was almost otherworldly.
Yeah.
And later on, when I talked, Michael and I became close, I said, I was in that room when you walked in, and I heard you singing that song. He said, I don't remember that. But he said, but I wouldn't be surprised that I sang it, because that's the first song I sang in kindergarten when I was 5 years old. Now, can you imagine a 5-year-old singing Climb Every Mountain?
Yeah.
I mean, just that gives you just a corner of Michael's creativity.
That's insane.
And then the way that he sang, if you want to go back and pick up that recording, and the thing was, they wanted me, because it was the first thing Michael had done on his own, and the brothers wanted to sing background, which he was fine with, and I was fine with it. So, but then when we did backgrounds, Michael actually joined that group too. And anyway, it was a wonderful first experience. And then after that, I don't know, we did a lot of things with him.
Yeah, that must be like just so ingrained into your mind, though, that moment of feeling his stardom,
Yes. And it's hard to explain, put it in words, how special he is. I used to tease him about being an alien, because but I learned so much about him and from him that he would come in or we would have meetings with him. My brother would go or I would go, and he used to say, give me one of the Bähler brothers. My brother and I were exchangeable, which we loved. As a matter of fact, when he did Heal the World, he called my brother and had him do the arrangement, and it was both kids and a chorus. And then about 6 weeks after they recorded, I get a call from Michael, and I always knew it was him because he's so quiet. He goes, hi, Tommy. How you doing, man? Hey, listen, I've written this song. It's called Heal the World, and I'd love for you to do the vocal arrangement on it. And I'm thinking, maybe he has me confused with my brother because he's already done it. And so that was the premise that I used. And it's the only time I ever heard a little bit of, well, I'll tell you what he sounded like. I said, Michael, if I'm not mistaken, my brother already did that arrangement. And he goes, yeah. like dummy, you don't know that I know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I went, oh. And I said, and you want me to do another arrangement? He goes, yeah. I said, okay, shall I listen to my brothers? No. He said, just do an arrangement. So, but I'd never had an artist do that. But there was something about Michael. I trusted him. I never second guessed him. So I go in and I do, and I never heard my brother's arrangement. And then when the record came out, he took both of our arrangements and melded them together. There were not both arrangements aren't going all the way through, but he'd go from my brother's arrangement to my arrangement. I mean, that is, wow. I've never met an artist
No.
That I'm not saying they don't exist, but I never. Anyway, so that was the kind of thing that Michael did, and then
Yeah.
later on, I loved. Well, I tell the story. I think it's on with Anthony Marinelli. I can't believe it. We've got 720,000 views of me telling the story of Beat It. And it's a short one. It's only about a six. We've done this a 20-minute long one, but it's the 6-minute one that has been. I used to get excited as 50 people looked at my stuff, and all of a sudden we got 720.
Yeah, it must be really cool to think,
almost
that many
a million.
people.
I know what Anthony said, man. If we put all these people in a stadium, we need 3 stadiums. Anyway. I loved it, but anyway, he when the synclavier came out,
Yeah.
I got involved in it because Don Dorsey, who is a wonderful musical collaborator, we worked together for years, and he called me and he said, "Hey, man, I just got this thing called a synclavier. You got to come out and see it." So I went to see it. And first of all, you don't have to turn dials, you just push up a sound, and it had all these sounds within it. And then also, he said, push that button and play something. And I pushed the button, played something, and then I stopped. And he said, okay, push it again. And it played back to me. I was like, That's the first sequencer I ever heard that was automatic. So anyway, I got very much in love, and the sounds were different. It was called FM. I'm not really a techie, but I'm a half a techie or a quarter techie. But it's called FM synthesis, which was better than analog, different. So it's all digital. And many of these guys that were onto it that helped, because the synclavier was developed at Dartmouth College you may be aware, but anyway, it's one of the better colleges in the anyway. And this guy, the head of the computer school, happened to be a bass player. So he played on the side and stuff. And as he got into this, he saw how the computers were developing so much. He goes, "Oh my God, we can make an instrument out of this." And that's when he made the synclavier. So anyway, but it was hard to show it because it took 3 guys to bring it in. It was a big, bulky thing, not the keyboard. The keyboard was like any other synthesizer, but then it plugged through these big cords into this huge thing. It probably weighed 200-300 pounds. So it wasn't easy to say, "Here, let me show you. Let me show you." So I really got interested in it. I liked the people who invented it, and I suggested that they get an office on the West Coast and help them develop that. And then I also suggested that they make a vinyl record so you can hear what the synclavier can do. That you can send to everybody. So they sent me a bunch of them, and I sent one to Quincy. I sent one to Michael, and I sent one to a number of my clients. And Michael calls and he says, oh man, that I love this. On the second side, on the third cut, it's called gong. I love this sound. And I said, yeah. And I said, what's cool is that all you have to do is push a button and it comes out. You don't have to dial it or wonder if you got it the same way that you did last time, Yeah. And he says, man, I love this. So then I hear from him about 3 or 4 weeks later. He said, man, remember I talked to you about that gong thing? He said, I've written a new song. Quincy wanted me to write something on the rock kind of a thing. So I wrote this thing. It's called Beat It. And he says, I want to start it with that sound. Bong, bong, bong. He said, where can I get a hold of a synclavier? I said, well, I have one. And he said, oh, bring it to the. So I brought it down there. And this is, I'm telling you this story to show you he has incredible ears. It's more than that, but I'll go on with my story. So I got this thing, and we come bring it in. They bring it in, plug it in, it goes, and he's all excited. And he said, show me where that is. And I show him where the gong is, and he says, play it for me. So I play it, and he looks at me with a little bit confusion, and he says, that's different. And I said, And I look at Bruce Swedeen, who was you know who Bruce is. I mean, Bruce, yeah, what a genius. Love that man. Anyway, I look at Bruce. Bruce looks at me, and I check. I said, "Well, this is the stop, you know." And I pushed it in again, and I played it. And he said, "It's different." And so now Bruce is getting it, and he said, "Do you have the record here, Bruce?" And he says, "Yeah." So he plays the record, and he goes, "That's the sound." Now, to me and Bruce at this point, it's the same sound.
Yeah.
So then Bruce goes, okay, I love it. Every time he'd want to do some work, he'd say, out. So we left him for about 20 minutes, and he came out and got us. And by that, because what he knew is that sound, in order to put it on a record, went through a lot of filters. And he could hear that.
Wow. So Michael could, like, even though he couldn't play an instrument, he could hear every detail.
Oh. Yeah, his acuity, I've never seen acuity like that.
Yeah.
And it's not in music, but maybe Elon Musk has that kind of acuity, you know?
Yeah.
So now what happened is that Bruce figures out the kind of filters, you know, the difference between the sounds, and now he attaches that to the output of my synclavier. So now we walk back in, and he said, okay, play it for him now. And I played him, he goes, that's it. Does that tell you something about the man?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and this happened, and you know what I learned about him? When he said, I have an idea, it was like he was inviting you to get into his rocket ship and go on a trip with him. That's the way it was.
Yeah. And
he wrote a song that still hasn't been released, because, you know, I love that they put all of this stuff in the musical. Because they said, how do you write a song? He says, well, first I look for what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So he gets an idea first, not just the melody or the beat.
The message,
you know,
first, and then build it around that.
What is this? So he called me and he said, okay, I've got this song, I want to put it on the front. So we did that, and then I kind of got myself on a sidewalk here, but that was one thing. But he called me and he said, hey man, he loved, like we all did, he loved I'm sorry, I have this dream.
No, it's okay.
The guy that said that, I mean, you know what I mean, he's the great black leader
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, Martin Luther. Thank you. It helps me get unscrambled here. He says, hey, man, I love Martin Luther King. And I said, I'm right with you. He said, well, I've written a song called I Have This Dream. And he said, he hadn't played it for me yet, but he said, I want you to get a 44-voice choir. I want a big choir on this. Now, normally, if a client would call and say, I want 44 voices, I would say to them, that's fine. If that's what you want, I'll do it. But tell you the truth, if we use 36 voices, you won't be able to tell the difference. And I can save you about $8,000, you know. But I would never say that with Michael, because if he said he wanted 44, I brought 44 in, and I got there early, of course. And Michael's not there. Now, normally when he's producing, he's the first one there, and he sets up mics. He learned that from Bruce.
He did that
Bruce,
himself?
Sweetie. Well, he liked to when he was producing. Yeah, wow. He was a hands-on dude, you know. And when he was producing, he was the first one there. He knew how to set the mics, and it was almost like a game to him. Nothing he did that I ever saw that he did was work. I went out to the ranch one time, and when I knock on the door, the guy comes in and he says, "Hey man, Michael's still dancing." He had his own dancing studio there. He said, "He's still dancing. I know he would love it. Take one of the golf carts and just wait outside. And when he comes out, he'll be so excited to see you." So I go that, and he comes out, and he's got this towel around his neck. He's sweating like a pig, and he looks at me. He goes, Tommy, look what I just learned." And he started dancing in the driveway. You know, I mean, this was it. Music and creativity owned him. They used him as a tool, and he was a willing person, you know. And the great composers that I've known, Burt Bacharach was one of them. They can't sleep. And, you know, when I first met Quincy, I said, "Hey, man, do you wake up in the middle of the night with tunes going through your head?" He said, "All the time." I said, "Do you write them down?" He said, "Hell yeah. Otherwise, I'll go to Mancini's house."
So it just like flows through these people like constantly, like a vessel.
Exactly. And that's what my dad taught, because my dad knew about, you know, I mean, he said, "Son, you don't have to look for something. Just be quiet and listen. Once you have an idea, you are connected to the universe. And if you just be quiet, I promise you it'll come to you." And sometimes they would come in as little nurturing babies, you know, and you'd watch them grow. And then, but I mean, She's Out of My Life, for instance, came to me on the Pasadena Freeway. And Pasadena Freeway is very curvy, and there's part of it that has no shoulders. And of course, that's when the song came in, because I had missed there was a woman I was very much in love with, but her family really wanted me to marry her, and I wanted to marry her, but I had been married before, and I was still trying to put you know, when you say, till you make the vow, till death do us part, that was really bothering me, because somehow my little brain inside was saying, okay, that was a vow. You broke that vow. You said till death do us part, but you didn't do that. So you were wrong. And I'm going, yeah, okay, so I'm wrong. And he said, well, what else are you wrong about? So I went on this terrible, terrible journey that wasn't fun at all. And in the meantime, the love of my life is saying, you know, I want to marry you. I love you. But my dad's Cuban. My mother is Irish. They're both big marrying cultures. and we're either going to get married or I'm going to go elsewhere. And it wasn't a threat. She's the sweetest woman I've ever met. But she was giving me the scoop. And actually, she did it. And then, you know, I was so mixed up, and I thought, you know, I'm just going to go date different people. And all my dates were vacuous, but it wasn't the women, it was me. So I'm driving home from another vacuous date, and I'm driving on the freeway, and I start to cry. And I miss her so much, and I want her so much. And I don't know if you've ever been so upset that you've talked to yourself. But I said, hey, man, she was there. She loved you. She wanted you. You wouldn't pull the trigger. So accept it. She's out of your life. And soon as I said that, word, that phrase.
Yeah.
It was like a drunken cowboy kicking down the doors of the saloon and demanding my attention. It came in, she's out of my life, she's out of my life. I don't know whether to live or die. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I don't know whether to live and die, and it feels like, and it cuts like a knife. I mean, all of this stuff started coming in. Well, normally when a song comes in that strong, because like I say, for me, they arrive differently every time, you know? And, but I would pull off and I just scribble something. And it was way before these, you know, we can do everything now. But I mean, it was, and I just scribbled down. I didn't have to write much because then it would all come back. So I couldn't do it. So I just kept singing it to myself till I got home. And then when I sat down at the piano, it took me 4 hours to get it in my fingers because the bridge is tricky. But I loved it. I heard it all in my head. I heard the accompaniment, the melody, the lyrics, all the lyrics except for one. That lyric didn't come. And this is what I love about Michael too. I'm going to weave him right back into this, is that when Michael first starts a song, it's either a hit. The first song he wrote on his own is Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And it starts with a bass, which is a hit. Dun, 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 dun. That's a hook, man.
Yeah.
That is a hook. It's a hit before he sang a melody or said a verse, you know? So, and what I loved about Michael he's worked it out, that when he gets the song, he doesn't try to finish it. He sings what comes to him, and then and la-di-da, you know? Yeah. And then it keeps coming in, a word here, a word there, you know? And that is pure trust in what Quincy and I call the muse, you know? And we look at the muse as a female because the feminine gives life.
That makes sense.
And we're having babies here.
Yeah, it just sort of like, do you see that as something that's just sort of comes from above and just like goes through you? Or do you feel that more sort of like comes from you, if you get what I mean?
Comes through me.
Yeah?
It comes through me, yeah. Quincy and I have stayed up nights talking about this kind of stuff, and I think it's different for everybody. But I think that there is a language that includes us all. Is that, you know, we're all part of the universe. We're made up the same stuff. You know, I can't say that one came from Mars. You know, but I just know. But what we all learned. And my dad was so helpful with us. He said, just listen and trust it.
Yeah.
And I remember being 5 years old, and I said, Dad, I learned how to read and write music not because my dad wanted me to, because I wanted to. And he saw my desire, so he helped me. Yeah. You know, he starts with the staff and yada, yada, yada. And it's never a lesson. He just tell me a few things that I could go work with. And I'd come back. I said, I want to know more, Dad. And he would lead me down to the next, you know. So
that passion.
Yeah. And it's Michael trusts that more than any other person I've met. And next to him, as fine as the people I know are Billy Joel, and these are only two of my friends that, you know, they create somewhat the same. When we were doing the Billy's producer, oh my God, I worked with him. So Phil Ramone, brilliant producer, and I worked with Philly for years. And I knew that he produced Billy. And in fact, Quincy and I dropped in the studio a few times when he was doing things. And but Phil calls me. He says, "Hey, man, Billy's doing a new album, and we would like for you to do the vocal arrangements." And I said, "Why?" I mean, Billy writes, and his vocals and his vocal arrangements are killer. I mean, I'll do it, but
Yeah.
there's something in my brain that goes, "Man, you can't even approach this dude, I mean, because he's him and you're you." And he said, "No, I understand, man, but he's doing this. This whole album is an homage to to Christy, when he met Christy." And they were very much in love. And he said, and so he's going back and pulling up the genres that shaped him.
Yeah.
And I thought, how beautiful is that? And he says, yeah, well, he's okay writing the songs, but he doesn't want to go into the minutia of doing the vocal arrangements. And I said, okay, now I get it. Now I get it. So the first song, in fact, I put it on Instagram and Facebook today. I think I found it the other day. There's a recording of just the backgrounds and him in Uptown Girl. That's the first arrangement I did for them.
Good song. Mm-hmm.
And it's such a great song.
Oh,
and he hummed me a lot of what he wanted me to do. And I don't remember who's what, but I love doing that arrangement and singing with Rory Dodd. And I mean, I never met these guys before, but Phil put them together. I flew to New York and walked in the studio, and there they are. And, but all of these things, Billy was in love. And you know what that does to us, And he was floating in all of these things. And in love with Christy was there every night in the studio. I mean, it was just making that album was such a thrill. And this is what I find that I'm so fortunate to, I wouldn't say I study hard. I don't really like to study hard, but when I love something, I give it so much time. It's probably the same as studying hard, and once I dive into something, I don't stop until it pleases me. And I find when it pleases me, it pleases my client. And I also listen to the client, whatever they say, I listen to them. And then put it through my filter and say, okay, this is what I have for you.
Right.
And
that makes a lot of sense.
And 9 times out of 10, they say, yeah, that's what I want, Yeah. Or they would say, hey, yes, I love this. Would you try this? In fact, when he cut She's Out of My Life, the original lyric after the bridge is damn indecision and cursed pride. I kept my love locked deep inside. Instead of being my wife, she's out of my life, which was the truth. And also I love the contrast between in marriage bliss and alone. Right? Yeah. So Michael comes up to me and he says, hey man, I want to talk to you about the lyric. And I said, yeah, cool. Well, I knew he was Jehovah's Witness, so I thought he probably won't sing damn indecision,
okay, yeah.
And he says, no, I'm okay. I'm a singer singing a song. But he said, when it gets to the end about marriage, that's not even on my screen, man. He was 19 years old. He said, it's not on my screen. I just like to get something more appropriate. And I said, well, give me a moment and I'll come up to it. And he goes, I have an idea. Here you go. And
he came prepared.
Yeah. And I said, what's that? He says, well, that line in the first verse, I've never heard it in a song, and I think it's so strong about it cuts like a knife. I said, okay, let me see. Damn indecision, cursed pride. I left my love for her locked deep inside, and it cuts like a knife. Oh, Michael. Oh, Michael. He says, well, it's your words. But see,
Yeah.
It's I
So
just
clever,
love.
isn't it?
To me, it's about giving yourself up, knowing that you're going to love what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to a movie that you've heard is great, you don't walk in and say, "Okay, show me your stuff."
Yeah.
No, you
You
go
go in
in with expecting
Yeah.
to be thrilled. Well, that's
Yeah.
what happens when I write and arrange. I expect to be thrilled, and it finds me. I don't find it. It finds
So
me.
interesting. So cool. Wow. So you've worked with so many greats, but
Yes.
one that stands out to me is Elvis Presley.
Oh yeah.
Tell me a bit about like how did that happen and what did you work on with him? What was that whole experience like?
Well, it was his comeback special in '68.
In '68.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
The
Okay.
iconic special.
Uh
And the
huh.
thing is that I had just gotten in the business um, as a singer. I was a trumpet player. We were all trumpet players. And I had a problem that I didn't know I had. And I couldn't play my horn for 2 years, which kind of broke my heart. But what I have found, when something terrible happens, something better comes along. Because I had sung all my life, never thinking that I would sing for a living. I played the trumpet, you
Yeah.
know? And all of a sudden, my brother, because the doctor said when they operated, they had to cut through this whole thing and all the muscles. And he said, "Your stomach is muscle bound. What do you do?" I said, "I play trumpet 5, 6 hours a day. And that's my major, yada, yada, yada." And he said, "Well, you're not going to play it for 2 years because I'm afraid you're going to pull that apart. And if you do, it could kill you." So I'm all of a sudden, the thing that I live for is going to kill me. And
Yeah. That
so
must flip your life upside down.
it did flip my life upside down. And this is where, again, my father was so helpful. I go home and I take a leave of absence at the school. And the thing is, I'm in my senior year. I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm doing my senior recital. And all of a sudden I can't play my horn. And so I go home and I'm just devastated. Everything I'd worked for all my life came to a halt. And my dad just listened to me. And after about a week or 10 days of me saying, "Oh, woe is me. I did everything they asked. I practiced every day. I did everything." And all of a sudden it's not fair. And he listens to me. And finally, about a week later, he said, "Son, I don't know the depth of your despair, but it's obvious to me that you're in despair." And he said, "That's kind of meat and right, actually. But some of the things you're saying, in fact, most of the things you're saying are disempowering. And I'm just wondering if it wouldn't make you feel better if you ask a question that was empowering." Now, I lived with my dad all my life, and I said, Dad, I've heard this, I said, "I can't even imagine a, a, a power, a powerful question."
Yeah.
And he said, "I can. You want to hear it?" So I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, if I were sitting where you are, I would ask myself, is all I am as a trumpet player?" And immediately something exploded out of me, and it was like, hell no, hell no. And he said, "There you go." So I hear that the Smothers Brothers show, which is the #1 show on television, they're in the middle of the season. There were 4 guys and 4 girls, and the tenor had decided he had gotten something better for him, so they were looking for a tenor, and So I went to my doctor and I said, let me sing for you and see if the pressure is fine. He said, oh, you can sing. That doesn't take much at all. It's playing the trumpet that'll, I said, okay, fine. So I went in and auditioned for this guy. And because I'd been reading music all my life, he puts this thing in front of me. Jimmy Joyce is his name. He's a lovely man. And he's the vocal director. And he said, sing this. And I sang it. He said, oh, you must know that. And I said, no, sir, I'm sight reading it. He goes, whoa. Okay, well, now he gives me something with lyrics. And he says, sing it. And I do it, sing it. And, and he said, wow. I said, well, sir, I learned how to read music before. He says, oh, okay. He said, well, you got the job. So now wow. I go on the Smothers Brothers show, and then and it's my first big time job. The thing was that I was so well prepared because my dad raised me with questions and suggestions, just like he said, and is all I am as a trumpet player. I mean, that changed my life. Yeah, what a simple thing to do. But he never told me what to do. Well, you should consider this. Well, even if we accept that, it is us being taught by someone else, which isn't a bad thing. But my dad believed that he would guide us, because that's what Aesop did. Yeah. He knew I loved Aesop. Because when you discover, you own it. It's yours.
That makes sense.
It's a big difference between having that and then somebody saying, hey, you're right. I should do that.
Yeah. And that led you on to working with Elvis.
So I'm working with Elvis. And they call me, and at the same time, Ford Motor Company had decided that they wanted a young look on their commercials. And they heard we had done a couple of albums called The Love Generation. And I wasn't writing hits yet, but it was very well produced, and we sang great and stuff. And we had a good group. And so what they did is Henry Ford II said, you can sell a young man's car to an old man. You can't sell an old man's car to a young man. I want a young face on this company. Right. That's what a king does, So he sends his, then it goes to the advertising company, and they send their minions out to go to the record because they don't want to start a group, because groups were big in the 60s. There were very few single singers. I mean, Bob Dylan was one, but most of it was a trio or a group or whatever. And so they see us, and we look good, and we're singing great, and that's what they wanted. They didn't want somebody that was a hit. They wanted somebody who was good, so they don't have to start with inventing the wheel. So that's how we got that job. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to John Naughton, who was the president of Ford Motor Company. And I get a call to do the Elvis special. And they're rehearsing the day that I'm meeting with the president of Ford. So as much as I want to do both, I said to the woman who called me, I said, I can't do the record. She said, why? I said, well, I'm meeting with the president of Ford. And she goes, oh, honey, that's okay. You go ahead and meet with him. You'll be fine on the gig. So I didn't go to the rehearsal with Elvis. So the next day, I'm there on the gig, and Elvis comes in with his gang. And these are buddies. These aren't hangers-on. They grew up together. And he walks in, and he sees the singers, and he remembers them by name, every one. And he gets to me, and he looks a little quizzical, and he said, hi, I don't believe we met. My name's Elvis Presley. And he put his hand out.
As if he has to introduce himself.
Exactly.
As if you didn't know his name.
But that's how beautiful he was as a soul.
Yeah.
And then we're singing, and he pulls out this cigar that's a very beautiful cigar. It was Italian. I didn't know at the time. But anyway, my brother and I, every now and then, would smoke a cigar. But the only ones with tips on them were like cheap, rotten, and these were like elegant. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, that's a beautiful cigar. He says, oh, you smoke cigars? I said, yeah. And my brother says, so do I. And so on a break, Elvis and my brother and I went into outside of this is Western One, and there was an alley in back, and nobody used it because it was kind of a right turn alley. So we went into the alley and smoked cigars and talked about cars, women, and sports. Just like any other dude.
Wow. That's extraordinary. What was the feeling like when you were actually performing with him on stage? We weren't
on stage. We weren't on stage because that's right. Really, most of the time, we as singers are off camera.
Right.
But it was glorious. It was glorious, because he is so gifted. Another one that's gifted in a different way, And now I think about James Brown, who was a mentor to Michael, not in person, but when they started opening, he was 5 years old when they were opening for James Brown at the the Great Theater in New York. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, so they would open, and then the boys, the lounge was upstairs in that theater, and the boys would go upstairs, but Michael would stand in the wings, and he would try to do the steps that James was doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes he got so carried away that there would be shadows on the stage, and they go, Michael, and he'd be, oh, I'm so sorry. He's such a sweetheart. And when I'll fast forward, they became friends. When he died, Michael rented a plane to fly down to the mortuary where he was at 4:00 in the morning, knocked on the door. And the guy comes to the door and he recognizes him. He said, I just want to see his body. Would you please let me see? I just kind of guided to come here and see him. And he looks at him. He says, oh, no. Please bring me. And he started asking for makeup and stuff for his hair and everything. He spent 4 hours on him, on his body. And when his family saw him and saw what he did to it, because he looked like he was asleep by the time Michael finished with him. Is that incredible? And they didn't even know he was coming. And they said, Michael, would you deliver the eulogy? And he said, of course I will. So he ended up delivering that. These are the kind of hearts and souls that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What a beautiful exchange of energies.
Yeah. Wow. Now, thank you for these wonderful stories so far.
Oh my gosh, I've just been going on for an hour.
It's wonderful. Let's take a quick break to thank the sponsor of this live stream. Then we have about 5 minutes left for some rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap this up.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. So this livestream is sponsored by MJ Market, who are a business created by passionate fans who believe that all Michael Jackson fans should have access to rare and unique collectible items at a great price. They source their items from all over the world to give you the best experience possible. This month, they're offering a box which includes one of 4 t-shirt options, a mystery cup, a poster, a badge, 8x10 photos, a promo stand-up and postcard, along with some other fun surprises. So head to michaeljacksonmarket.com and use the coupon code REDJACKSON for $10 off your box. Thank you once again to MJ Market for sponsoring this live stream. Now, Tommy, we've had a question in from a viewer here before we wrap things up. Somebody asks if there were any hindrances in Michael's creativity because he didn't play a musical instrument.
No, not at all. In fact, it was free. He's free.
Right.
Because he can sing anything. His rhythm, he is so blessed with rhythm. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Sometimes he starts with rhythm. He starts with a thought. Sometimes, and then he builds a melody about it. No, I think it absolutely freed him. And that's the point, is that every composer I've known who is really someone that I admire, like Burt Bacharach asked me to go on the road with him. Well, I couldn't go on the road. I mean, if I go on the road, I lose money because we make a lot more money recording. Yeah. So I told him that. And he said, well, I really want you to go. So let me know how much you make a week and I'll see what. And finally he said, I'm going to pay you that, but I want this between you and me. So we had a friendship, there was something good between us. And so now I say back to him and I said, well, I have a request. And he said, what? I said, I would like 2 hours a week with you, because we're going to be live in Vegas at the one of the big hotels. And I said, I'd like two hours with you a week. And he said, why? And I said, because I've written 2 hits and you've written 45. I think I could probably learn something from you. And he said, oh, okay, cool. So the first night, and he said, we'll meet in the men's club afterward, because he played tennis and I played golf. So we would meet after, and then, so we'd be getting rub downs and then we go into the steam bath, you know what I mean? And just talk and chat.
Yeah.
So I said, the first question I had for me, I said, Bert, do you write at the piano? And he said, no, like disgusted, no. And I said, well, you're a fine pianist, so I understand why I don't write at the piano, but you. And you know what he did? He held up his hands. We're lying down. He holds up his hands. He said, these are finite. And that told me that no matter how good you are at an instrument, even singing or whatever else, it is finite.
Yeah.
Our imagination is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
So the question to your friend who just asked this, no, it freed him up. Because how easy is it for him to go dun, 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 where if he had a drum in front of him, he'd have to play it and get his muscles involved. If it's coming from our hearts and our minds and our connection to the universe, and I don't mean to sound spacey about this, but I don't know, I'm living proof of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I've never felt less than anybody that I've ever worked with, because I feel solid within myself. I've never anything I've ever done, I do the best I can.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, well, I did my best.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good way of looking at it.
Well, it works for me,
Yeah.
and actually I'm not here to well, we'll do this later, but I wrote a book that was based on my family of philosophy, which really has shaped me. And I'm not trying to sell a book, but if you're interested, it's called What You Want Wants You. My grandmother was her favorite thing to say. I said, grandmother, I have an idea. She said, oh, I love it. This idea picked you to bring it to the rest of us. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Well, so I call this book What You Want Wants You. And if you use my name, Thomas Bähler, you'll find it. And it's not a long book, but it's a heartfelt book.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Yeah. You must be so proud of, having accomplished so many things. And I mean, one of your biggest projects that loads of people are talking about even now due to the recent release of a new documentary is We Are the World. And I've got
Yes.
some photos here of you working on it. So before we wrap it up, because I know you haven't got much time, I just want to ask a few rapid fire questions. So your role was to allocate the solos, co-produce the song, and arrange the vocals. So let's say when you initially got that phone call to work on the project, what was your first reaction?
Well, I knew it was important. I love the fact, first of all, I love Ken Cragen because I met him when I was on the Smothers Brothers show. I'd known him since my first gig, and he's a marvelous man. And when Quincy called me, he said, "Hey, man, you've heard of Do They Know It's Christmas?" And he said, Geldof figured out he screwed up because nobody's going to play that song in March.
Yeah.
Real simple. That's Quincy's kind of, and so we're doing a new song, and he said, "I want you to handle the artist, man, because we don't even know who we have, but it's going to be a whole bunch of guys and a whole bunch of people, and I want you to do that." I said, "Yeah, great. Can I hear the song?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Oh, well, I never questioned Quincy either because it wasn't finished when he talked to me about this."
Yeah.
We had nothing, man. And 2 weeks later, we had something. I love this picture of Diana and me. I love that woman.
Great,
She, anyway, I could go on and on about those things, but and the thing is, I've heard a lot of people say, "Wasn't it difficult picking who to sing?" And I said, no, because when I went, the only thing Quincy said, "I want you to do the arrangement," but because Lionel is the first person to write it, to start it, I want him to be the first one to sing. That makes sense. Yeah. And then he said the first and Michael finished the song. So I want the first chorus to be Michael. And then halfway in, I want you to bring in Diana because a lot of people think they're the same person. And that's just his sense of humor.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we did. And he said, "The rest is yours." So what I did is I picked out, we'd already talked about the people that we wanted to be the soloists. So that wasn't a mystery. But once I took the list and I looked at the list, I heard the second voice. They stood up and sang to me that line that I wanted them to sing. That's what I heard in my head. Yeah, so I didn't have to search for them. Again, they were already in me, waiting to get out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was there was there anybody you wanted to perform a solo, but they objected or they didn't fit in, or anybody who really wanted to perform a solo, but you couldn't fit them in? Was there any jealousy or anything like that?
Not necessarily jealousy, but questions. Quincy handled those because he is the best. A couple of the artists said, "I really wanted to be one of the soloists." And when they finished talking to Quincy, they walked away satisfied.
Yeah.
He is a master at that. And there's not 1 ounce of bullshit in this man. He's the godfather to my son, my son. I mean, I love this man. Next to my father, Quincy Jones is the most important man in my life. And when I told him that, about a year or so ago, I looked up and he had tears in his eyes. That's the kind of man that Quincy Jones is. He's so smart.
Yeah.
And talk about the mountains he's climbed in his life. He's just, I got to tell you real quick. He's speaking at Morehouse, the university. It's a black university.
Right.
And he always takes questions. And this young lady stands up out in the audience. She goes, "Mr. Jones, but how do I keep from getting discouraged. This business is so hard. And this is what Quincy's answer was. He said, my dear, if you can be discouraged, you should be discouraged. And the audience went quiet. And I thought, oh my God, Q, you've gone too far. But you know what? That was his reaction to her. And later on, he also would sign autographs. And she came up to him. She had tears running down her face. And she said, thank you for unlocking the door for me. Whatever he said to her ignited her.
Wow. So he very much had a way with, has a way with people.
Yes, and it's because he loves them so much. He doesn't have to sit down and figure out. The second she said that, he had that answer. He had not ever said that before or since that I know of.
No.
But that's him. And that's why he was the best thing that could happen to Michael, because Michael had been told no by everybody, and not in a bad way. Motown had their way of making records. There were only two people that could do what they wanted, and that was Marvin Gaye and oh my God, who did I say sang the second verse? The second line. Stevie Wonder. Yeah, no. No, Lionel is the first one. Yeah, and that's when I heard Steve, and then I just heard every one of them stood up, and especially when it got to the second verse, because the first verse was Michael, and it was so pure and beautiful. And what a great way to say we are the world. He just sucked us in, And then Diana comes in, and I thought the next one I heard, it was the boss man, because he's dirty. We are the world, and then having. Anyway, all the people stood up and I saw them. And heard them. So it took me 30 minutes to write that arrangement.
Yeah.
And they go, you're a genius. I said, no, I just listen well. I listened to that wonderful world out there and the universe out there that has everything that we'll ever think of. So that's the way I breathe through I breathe through my career, seriously. As long as I listen to my instincts, they have yet to fail me.
That's remarkable. And what a way to live. I'm curious, because there were so many artists, and that must have been pretty crazy. Was anybody different to your expectations? And did people have certain quirks or interesting ways they prepared to sing or anything?
You know what I'm thinking? I'd really like to get into this with you. Can we do this again another time?
Yeah. How about we do a follow-up?
Yeah, let's do a follow-up and we'll get into that, because I have a lot to say about that.
Okay.
And it was all good. And anyway, but if I start now, I'm going to miss my next.
No problem at all.
Commitment.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to see you and your.
I know.
And the
people
so
that much.
follow you. You are a great guy, Red, and I'm so glad I said yes. Again, I had no idea who you were, but there was something. I get it. I'm sure you do get from people's questions and statements. You get a feeling about who they are, and you felt good to me. So I thought, why not?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. And we'll absolutely sit down and we'll do a We Are the World special. We'll focus on that. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to ask you to send me a copy of this, okay? For my
absolutely.
archives only. All right.
On it.
I got to sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Great seeing you. Bye.
Love and music to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So there we go. That was an interview with the wonderful Mr. Tom Bähler. As we said, we'll do a follow-up to this where we'll focus on We Are the World. There's a new documentary out called The Greatest Night in Pop, and that's focused on the night they recorded We Are the World. And Mr. Bähler features in that prominently. So, ready for the next interview? Feel free to go watch that on Netflix to get some context, because I have some interesting questions about all the different artists and how they sort of collaborated together and the tension on that night. But thank you so much everybody for watching today. It's been a real pleasure. It's been really fun. Stay tuned on my social media, Twitter, Instagram, and here on YouTube I'll post on my community tab at Red Jackson Dance. I'll post an announcement of when we do the follow-up. But thank you for being here, and thank you once again to the sponsor of this video, Michael Jackson Market. So there you have it. That's it for the live stream today. And stay tuned, because once we do the follow-up a few weeks later, I'll be posting my recorded interview I did last month with Daryl Finnessy, who was Michael Jackson's longtime backup vocalist. He did every single one of Michael Jackson's world tours, and this is it. That's a really interesting one. It's about an hour and a half, so it's loaded with stories, insight, loads of fun. So keep an eye out for that. That's all from me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.